Hi book lovers, it's Jenny at Julia Baby Jen's Reading Room, and this is my August wrap-up.
Busted!
August was an awesome reading month for me. I read a total of 33 books. 4 of those were rereads, and yeah, it was really good, and I read some really amazing books. So here we go.
Where it began, I can't begin to knowing, but then I know it's growing strong. Wasn't the spring, and spring became summer. Who'd have believed you'd come along? Touching hands, reaching out, touching me, touching you. Sweet Caroline, good times never seem so good. I've been inclined to believe in
of Frost by Jennifer Estep. This is the second book in the Mythos Academy series, and I finally got a chance to read this one. I read the first one many months ago, and I loved it. This book looks right where it left off, and it was just as good. I love these books. They're such quick reads and so much fun. It has that mythological element, which I just really like. And yeah, so yeah, I really like Gwen. I wanted to kick Logan's butt in this one, but and a few other guys. So yeah, I really enjoyed this series, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest of it. And I rated it 4 stars. I did a reread of Inkheart by Cornelia Funk with some friends of mine. They had never read it, and I told them it was so good, and so they finally did. And it is a really good, really good series. What can I say? I love this series so much. It's classified as middle grade, but it doesn't feel like it. It's one of those that kind of crosses genres kind of thing, and the writing is really well done. It's just beautiful and poetic. It's a great fantasy story. So yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite books ever, and it was just as good the second time. I loved it. I originally rated it 5 stars, and I'm keeping it at that rating. The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. Oh my word, I loved this book. I think this might be my favorite of the month. This was so good. 5-star read, hands down. Just a beautiful book, so inventive, so different. Interesting narration, a really good historical story. Just absolutely beautiful, and the characters were great. While I was reading it, I didn't really, the characters were good, but I didn't really feel that connection to the characters as I was reading it. It was more, I just really wanted to know what was going to happen, and the narration was really good. The words were great. The historical backdrop was so heartbreaking. I was so into it, but the end of it, oh my gosh, I realized how much I really did love the characters, and I bawled so much at the end. It's so beautiful and so sad, and oh my gosh, if you have not read this book, this is one of those books that everybody should read. I mean, anybody who likes to read a book will love it. Then I read Many Bloody Returns, which is edited by Shirley Harris. I actually only read the first story, which is the Suki Stackhouse story in the beginning, which is why I checked it out. So really, I only read the first story. I ended up marking the whole book on Goodreads, though, because I could not find that specific story on Goodreads to mark that I'd read, so I just marked that I read the whole book. I gave it 3 stars. It was okay. Really, it was my least favorite Suki Stackhouse read I've ever read. I don't know, it wasn't very, I don't know, half of it was just explaining her world, which I already knew, so I don't know, there just wasn't very much action to it. Sam was only in it for like 2 or 3 paragraphs, and he's my favorite character, so oh well, I can say that I read that story now. It's called Dracula Night. Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, another 5-star read this month. I've read quite a few. This one I loved. I had only heard good things about it, so I grabbed it. I'm not usually a gamer person, although I have played games, so I get it all. I get the whole idea behind it, so that isn't too hard for me to relate to. But the dystopian factor in this one was just amazing, and how it weaved it into this game, and it's a really good dystopian. So yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was different and interesting, and yeah, a great 5-star read. Burn for Burn by Jenny Han and Sayavan Vivian. This is a collaboration YA contemporary, and there's a sequel coming out really soon called, I think, Fire with Fire. But basically, it's about these 3 girls on the cover. Lilia, who is Miss Popular, not the most popular, her best friend is actually the most popular, Reese. And then we have Mary, who is very damaged. She's, and then we have Kat, who is your basic goth girl, rebel girl, I guess. And Lilia and Kat used to be very good friends when they were younger. It's basically this little group of islands community. There's the mainland, there's others offset islands, but they all go to the same high school on the mainland. But basically what's happened is all 3 of these girls have been burned by a boy. This one, extremely bad. And they're all about to get revenge. So they're getting revenge on 3 different people. 2 of them are guys, and one of them is actually her best friend, so she's been burned by her best friend and this guy, this popular boy. She's been burned by the most popular boy, and a long time ago that totally damaged her. She just moved back to the island, actually, and no one remembers her. And Kat was burned by the same boy as her, and then her best friend. So they are going to get revenge on these 3 people, and they're going to work together, but it's a secret, and they're because they don't want anybody to know what they're doing. But things get out of control, and yeah, they think they have all the facts, and they don't. So it has good twists in it. But so they go on this spree to get revenge, and it ends on a really big cliffhanger for the next one. So I'm excited to read it. It was a pretty good story. It wasn't, really great, but I thought it was interesting. So I gave it 4 stars. Keeping the Castle by Patrice Kendall. I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. It's a very short, quick read with a gorgeous cover. But it's basically historical fiction. It's like a Jane Austen, but it's really funny. Laugh out loud, hilarious. I just really enjoyed it. So I'm gonna have to check out some other books by this author. This isn't her first book, but yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Stormbringers, book 2 of the Order of Darkness series by Philippa Gregory. I gave this 4 stars. This is a historical fiction with a little bit of fantasy thrown in. Not a huge fantasy, it's more realistic, but this is the sequel, and I liked it even better than the first one, Changeling, and it's really good. The characters are great in it, and it's kind of an adventure story. So yeah, I really like how it's written. So I'm excited when the last book will come out, which I would assume will be next year. Quarantine the Loners by Lex Thomas. I gave this one 4 stars, and I really enjoyed it. It's a Lord of the Flies style of dystopian. It reminded me a lot of Variant, actually, by Robinson Wells, but better. I thought it was better than Variant. They're not as well organized, and it's a lot freakier, and anything will happen. And so basically the premise of this story is there is this disease that teenagers can contract. It was developed in a lab, and one of the test subjects escaped this boy, and he ends up at this high school. So basically, anyone who's exposed to this disease, as soon as you turn, I believe it's 18, it kills you within minutes. So any adult that's exposed to it, and it's very contagious, it's airborne, and so basically what happens is the first day of school, this kid escapes into the school, and government has been tracking him, so they realize he's in the school. So they blow up part of the school to try to kill the disease, and then they erect a huge tent over the school. And basically all of the teachers, all the adults, and anybody who was over age 18, so some of the seniors, died that first day, like within minutes. And the rest of them, they are stuck there in the school. They're quarantined in this school. Eventually, they drop off supplies like every 2 weeks through a helicopter crane. They just dump them into the quad, all the supplies that they would need. And of course, they fight over it. They develop gangs, basically, and the gangs try to get their share of the supplies, and then they trade and they barter with each other. And they have this, in the main hall, they have this test booth thing. When they're about to turn 18, they can go put their fingerprint on it, and it will give them clearance to exit the school, and then they have a way to decontaminate the person so they don't die. So they're stuck there until right before they turn 18. So it's a really interesting premise, and basically this is about the loners, and this is David's the main character, and his little brother Will. They are the loners. They're their own little gang, the two of them, and they fly under the radar. And so this is all about their story in this school. So it's really interesting, and it's freaky, and it's a really good dystopian. So yeah, I'm excited to read the sequel to this. Graceling by Kristen Dushore. This is actually a reread for me. I read this a few years ago, and when I read it, I don't think it had even existed anymore in the blogosphere. I didn't hear anybody talking about this book, but I happened to find it that one summer at one of my libraries, and I thought the cover was gorgeous, and so I decided to try it and read it, and I fell in love with this book. And seriously, maybe other people were reading it, but I didn't hear of anybody reading them. So I feel like I discovered this book. Well, I didn't, of course, but I feel like it. So yeah, this book is very dear to me, and I love it. I need to buy a copy, but yeah, so I reread it. This is my second time reading it, and I loved it the second time around just as much as the first, if not better, because I knew what Poe's ability really was, and I was able to catch all those clues that I missed the first time. So that was fun. And then I just love Katza. I love this world so much. Mainly I wanted to read this because I haven't read Bitter Blue yet, which I've had on my shelf since it came out, which has been a long time. I think it's close to a year now. And that one is more of a sequel of this one. So I wanted kind of a refresher on this book before I read Bitter Blue. So yeah. But yeah, 5-star read, really good. If you haven't read this fantasy, I definitely recommend it. Dreamland by Sarah Dessen. I enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. It was totally different than what I was expecting. I was expecting a really light summer read, and it got a little heavy and dark. It's actually about a girl who has a boyfriend who hits her. And it takes you through the stages of their entire relationship, from when she first kind of meets him all the way through. And I was not expecting that. I mean, I had no idea that he was going to turn violent on her. I sensed that I didn't really like him all that much. There were certain things he did in the beginning that I just kind of felt like, I don't know. But as a teenager, I might not have noticed. I probably wouldn't have caught on either if I had been her. I don't think she's to be blamed at all. I mean, I think she should have spoken up a lot sooner. She eventually, I understand a lot why she didn't. You know, I would like to think that I would have, but I've never been in that kind of a relationship, and I hope I never will be. And I don't know. It's really easy to point fingers and say, oh, I wouldn't have done that way. There's no way I would be involved with someone like that. Probably in all likelihood, no. I'm pretty good read a character, and I probably would catch clues earlier than she did, but you know, when she was in the place that she was in this book, I might not have caught it. And I have to say that when I was her age and I was in high school, I was pretty stupid too. I mean, who knows? But anyway, I thought it was good, and it gives a kind of an insight into that kind of relationship, and maybe it will help other girls see the signs too. So that's all you can hope for. Alice in the Country of Hearts. This is a manga I read and I really enjoyed it. I give it 4 stars. It's an Alice in Wonderland story, but it's set up almost like a virtual game, almost a modern day thing. She's stuck in this world, and basically everybody falls in love with her. It's kind of interesting. So yeah, it was different. I liked it, and I will probably read the next ones in the series too, just to see what happens. And I gave it 4 stars. I did a reread of Throne of Fire by Rick Riordan. This is a 5-star read for me, and it still was. I really, really enjoyed this series. And then I read the last book, Serpent's Shadow, which has been sitting on my shelf for a long time, and I finally got to it. And it's a 5-star read. I loved it. The best out of this series, I think. I think so far my favorite Rick Riordan book. So yeah, this is good. I like the Kane Chronicles a lot. I like them better than Percy Jackson, actually, just because it's so different. I don't know as much about Egyptian mythology as I do about Greek mythology. I know some, but I didn't know very much. Now I know a lot, but I didn't know as much, so I think that was part of the appeal for me, getting to learn something kind of new, and it's just very different and interesting, and I just kind of really liked it. And I like the idea that Sadie and Carter were brother and sister, and they were descendant of Egyptian pharaohs, the Egyptian pharaoh line. And I thought that was kind of cool, a neat historical aspect to it. So yeah, I really like this series. Revenge of the Girl with a Great Personality by Elizabeth Eulberg. I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this one. This is actually about beauty pageants, and it was really interesting to me. And I think it's my favorite so far of Elizabeth Eulberg's books. I've read 3 of her books, including this one, and they're all very different subject matter, which I think is cool. She writes contemporaries, but each one has been something completely different, which is really cool. But this is my favorite so far. Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. So I was finally able to find a copy of one of these in my library. I've been looking for a copy of Uglies forever, and I finally found one. So I read it, and I liked it. I gave it 4 stars, and I'm excited to read the rest of the series. I know lots of people love this series and have talked about it, so I was really happy to get a chance to read it. I have Pretties on my shelf behind me, so I'll probably read that in September. Fire Country by David Estes. This was an amazing read. I think my favorite of the month. Well, I guess I read The Book Thief this month, so I've read some really good books this month. I don't know how I'm going to pick my favorite. Probably The Book Thief, but this is right behind it. Fire Country by David Estes, the first book in the Country Saga, sister series to The Dwellers, and this was his, trying to think here, what order, he wrote the Angels series first, and I think he wrote Nikki Power Gloves first too. I don't remember how many books this was, but he released it this year at the beginning of the year, so, but this is my 4th book of his that I've read, and it's the best I've read of his. His books get better and better each one I read. I started with The Dwellers, which was his 2nd young adult series, and this is his 3rd series, and they are set in the same world. So I really like this one. This had everything I would want in a good dystopian. So the characters were great. I loved Sienna. She reminded me a lot of myself when I was younger, actually. I was super skinny and scrawny and weak and tripping on my own feet all the time. I can't tell you how many times I sprained my ankles, or I never broke anything, but that's just because I have really hard bones. But yeah, I hurt myself all the time, and it was always me hurting myself. No one else touched me. It was always gravity or myself that did it. I was awfully glad I wasn't living in Fire Country, because my world was hard enough. So, but yeah, I really like this book. First book I read in August was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, and I absolutely loved this fantasy. It was amazing to me. I loved everything about it. It's one of the better fantasies I've ever read in YA, and I am really excited to read Siege and Storm, which I have not gotten a copy yet, but I will hopefully get one shortly. But yeah, I loved how her ability didn't come easy to her. She had to work, and she had to learn a lot about herself before it became easy, and she had a lot of lessons to learn in there. And I like the world building, and the villain was well done, and all the characters, so it's a very good fantasy. Give it 5 stars. I read Crossing the Line by Katie McGarry. This is a short story novella. This takes place right after the events in Pushing the Limits, and this is about Lila. who is Echo's best friend. And I enjoyed this story. I thought it was good. I would have preferred actually a full-length story because it felt so cut short to me, but pretty good short story, and I gave it 4 stars. The Incorrigible Children of Ashton Place, The Mysterious Hallie by Mary Rose Wood. This is the first in a series, and it's a children's book, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was very interesting. It was kind of a cool concept, and it was a quick, fun read, and I do have the next 2 in the series to read, so I enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. Pivot Point by Casey West, and I really loved this book. This was totally different. It had a sci-fi feeling to it, but yet it felt a little bit like a contemporary, and it was really interesting. I loved it. I am really excited to read the sequel. It started off, you know, kind of slow, and basically it's about a girl who has an ability, a paranormal ability, to see her own future if she's facing a certain choice. She can live out both choices and then go from there and pick which one she wants to do. And while she's living each choice, it's all in her head, but it feels very real to her. So it is like living it, which is kind of interesting. So she had, basically her parents are getting divorced, and she has to make a decision whether she wants to stay with her mom, who's going to stay in their paranormal community, their hidden community, and continue like normal with her best friend, or her dad is going back to regular civilization with real humans, and she can go with him. So she lives out both, and it flip-flops. What I love the best about this is the narration, because it flips-flops each chapter. One chapter it's her life with her dad, the next chapter is with her mom. And as it gets going, it's really interesting because there's such parallels between each choice, each life basically. You can see how the effects of one is affecting the effects of the other, and it's really kind of interesting and different and very smartly done, and I really enjoyed it. She's basically left with almost an impossible choice at the end. I think she made the right choice, and the sequel, I'm really excited to see the sequel, or read the sequel. So yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed it a lot, and I gave it 5 stars. First Frost by Jennifer Estep. This is a prequel novella to the Mythos Academy series, and takes place right before the first book. This is the backstory of how she, her psychic gift goes crazy, and she ends up basically at the academy that she's in through the rest of the series. And she talks about it's talked about a few times through, I've only read the first 2 books, but it's talked about a couple different times in the first 2 books, but this gives you the actual details of how it all went down, and it was a really good story. I really liked this, and I don't know if you necessarily need to read it before you read the first book. I think you could read it either way. I think it's going to mean more to you to read it after the first book or 2, because you'll get more the whole, the significance of it. But it's good backstory, so you could really read it either way. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. The Sun Dwellers by David Estes. This is the 3rd book in the Dwellers series, and it kind of finishes off the trilogy, but there is a 4th and final book that comes out here next week. So I'm really, really excited for that, and it's a 4th and final book to this series and its sister series, The Country Saga. So it's kind of cool how they all are going to intertwine together with this last book. So I'm very excited for it. I really enjoyed this. I thought this finished up really well. I actually was just obsessed with the last half of this book, and I could not read it fast enough. I don't know if I've ever read a ending of a book so fast. I was so obsessed. I had to know what was going to happen to Tristan and Adele and all the characters, and I just knew someone had to die, and I was really hoping no one would, but I knew it wasn't realistic if no one died. But yeah, it was really, really good, and I really enjoyed it, and it got 5 stars. Odd Thomas by Dean Koontz. I did a reread of Odd Thomas. I actually did it in audiobook format, which took a long time because it was a 10 and a half hour listening time book. So it took me close to a month to listen to the entire thing, but I was only listening to it really in my car. It was a reread. It's a 5-star read. I love this series so much, and I'm excited to reread the rest of the series. I actually have not read the last 3 books in the series yet, so I thought it would be fun to reread the first 3 and then read the other ones and just read it all at once. I like reading series all at once. It's a lot of fun. The Wide Window by Lemony Snicket. This is the 3rd book in a series of unfortunate events, and I gave this one 3 stars just like the other ones. It's a fun, cute children's story. I'm really reading it because I've heard so much about it. I know lots of booktubers who love this series. I would imagine a lot of that has to do with their age. They were younger when it came out, and so they were into it. But I still wanted to see what it was all about. And my daughter's reading the series too, so it's kind of fun to read it with her together. I have noticed that the books seem to get better as they go. I liked The Miserable Mill a lot better than the first two, and I thought it was way more interesting, and the plot was a lot better. So yeah, it's a cute children's book. And then I also read The Miserable Mill, which is the 4th book, and this one was even better than The Wide Window. So yeah, these are markedly getting improving. I gave it 3 stars as well, but each book seems to be getting a little bit better. Last Sacrifice by Rochelle Mead. Oh, I'm so happy. I don't know why it took me so long to finish Vampire Academy series, but I finally read the last book, and I read it in a day, all 600 pages of it, and I just loved it. It was a perfect ending book to the series. I really like how things turned out, although, spoiler alert, if you haven't read this series or you're planning to, I was so heartbroken for Adrian, oh my word. The spin-off series is about him, so I'm excited about that, because I actually liked Adrian better than Dimitri, but I don't blame Rose for her choices. I think that in the end, Dimitri was a better choice for her. They're a lot more alike than she is with Adrian, and Adrian was totally in love with her, and she just couldn't reciprocate that. I mean, she loved him, but not to that extent, and if the relationship is unequal in that way, it just won't work. So, although that scene where he comes and he basically screams in her face and is so mad at her, I felt so bad for both of them, because I didn't really blame Rose, but she didn't do things the right way, but they were in impossible situations. So, and I don't blame Adrian for his anger either, but I kind of felt like shaking him a little bit, like, did you really expect for it to end any other way? He was living in the clouds, because there's no way that he and Rose were, and I knew this from the beginning of the relationship, there was no way they were going to make it. And mainly it was because he was a spirit user. It just wasn't going to work. So, yeah. But what happened with Lissa was just amazing, and I thought the world building in this one was great. All the little things, and I had no idea who the real murderer of the queen was, and I was shocked at the end to find out who it was, because I had suspected Adrian's mom way before they all mentioned it. Actually, I suspected her in the last book, but I was wrong, so I'm impressed. So yeah, I will read the spin-off series, and I'm really excited, and I'm really happy I finished Vampire Academy. It is a really good vampire series, and what I love about it is it doesn't really feel like vampires. I mean, obviously there are, and there's mentions of the vampires, but the series goes along, they're not. It's just a whole big world, and vampires are just a small part of it. And I just really like that. I really like how the world is. So pretty awesome. I love this series, and I did give this book 5 stars. Level 2 by Lenore Applehans. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I'm not really sure on that, but hopefully I got that right. This one I had on my list from the beginning of the year. This was released, a new author. This is the book 1 of the Memory Chronicles, and I knew it was going to be kind of like a sci-fi dystopian, but it was a lot different than that, and it was really not at all what I was expecting. It had a really good sci-fi element with it, but it also had like these evil angels, which I can totally get behind, and then it had this religious stuff, and it was a combination of sci-fi and paranormal and religious stuff, so that was different. The concept of it I could kind of get behind. I thought it was interesting, and at the beginning of the book it started off really, really good, and I was intrigued and really wanted to know what was going to happen. But at the same time, I couldn't get absorbed into the story, and I think it was the writing. The writing just was kind of mediocre, and it just, I don't know, it just didn't really grip me enough. Now, towards the ending, I thought the writing got better, and things happened that were really, really interesting, but I was just so darn confused. In the middle of the book, I was so confused, and I still am a little bit. By the end of it, I kind of came to terms with a lot of it, but, you know, I just couldn't get really into it. So it was just kind of a meh book, you know, mediocre meh book for me. It was okay. So I'm giving it 3 stars. It wasn't a horrible book. I could see where some people would really like it. It was a little bit, I don't know. I just didn't connect with it enough, I guess. I don't think it was a bad book by any means, and it was an interesting concept, and I thought that was very original and cool. And I did like the main character, but things were so confusing and just, I don't think, well explained. There was a lot crammed into 280 pages. I think that it needed a little more depth. So anyway, 3-star read. Twitter Diaries by Georgie Thompson and Imogen Lloyd Webber. And this is basically a chick lit type of book, adult contemporary read. It's about 2 friends, and everybody in here you get to know them by their Twitter handle. So it's Tuesday Fields, who's a British sports reporter, and Stella Cavill, who's a New York-based men's shoe designer. And they meet on New Year's at a mutual friend's party, and they become friends. And this is basically, this book is a year of corresponding to each other on Twitter. So the entire book is Twitter format, and they're talking to each other, and there's other people in their lives you get to know by their Twitter handles as well. So it's different, and it took me a little while to get used to the Twitter style, I guess, the writing. But once I did, I flew right through it. It was interesting. I enjoyed it. It was fun. It's got a really low rating on Goodreads. Luckily I didn't look at the rating before I read it. A friend sent it to me, is why I read it. And I didn't look at the rating, but it has a really low Goodreads rating, and most of the ratings are 2-star ratings. And almost every rating says they just didn't really like the style. So I'm thinking, if you don't know anything about Twitter and you're not on Twitter very much, you might not like this. And you still might, even if you like Twitter, you might not like it, because a lot of people who were on there said that they liked Twitter, but I don't know. I guess it's the style. But once I got used to that and who the Twitter handles corresponded to, I was fine with it, and the last half of it I read really fast. So it was interesting. It was hilarious and funny, and yeah, basically it says a lot can happen in a year, and this a tale of 2 cities, 1 friendship, and 140 characters, which is how many characters you can type on Twitter. So yeah, it was interesting. I give it 4 stars. That was my August reads, and it turned out really well. I'm hoping to have another really good month for September, but I've started another project, I've started 2 more projects, so I've got a lot I'm doing, so I don't know how much I will get read, but my list is really huge. I did post a September TBR already. It's on my channel. And now looking at it and looking at what I'm going to try to do this month, I don't think I'll even get half of it read, but I can hope for a miracle. So everyone have a good September. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Busted.